everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for episode 7 of season 6 of the Revised and Resubmit podcast. I'm Dr. Kim Bissell, the Southern Progress Endowed Professor in Magazine Journalism and the Associate Dean for Research in the College of Communication and Information Sciences at the University of Alabama.
And I'm Dr. Annalisa Boland, an assistant professor in the Department of Communication Studies, also at the University of Alabama. And we both work in the Institute for Communication and Information Research, or the ICIR, at UA.
In today's episode, we're returning to our What's New With series and catching up with a previous podcast guest to check in and see what they've been up to in the last 2 years. Because yes, it's been 2 years since we talked to many of them. Today's episode gives us an opportunity to do just that as we catch up with Dr. Shaheen Kanthawala, an assistant professor in the Department of Journalism and Creative Media.
But before we let you hear from Shaheen, we are going to kick off today's episode with a question. Okay, so Kim, are you a tracker? And I mean, this is of anything. And how does tracking make you feel? And I say anything, not anyone. This is not a creeper conversation coming up.
Absolutely not. This is a really good question too. And the answer to part 1 of the question is definitely yes. I am a tracker. I do have a Peloton app on my phone and I use it to schedule and plan my workouts for the next day to keep track of what I've done on that day. And I especially use it when I travel and I'm away from my actual Peloton. So that particular app, definitely love. I also have used nutrition-based tracking apps that, to be fair, didn't last super long. It took way too much time for me to find the foods that I had eaten and try to figure out what the portion amount was. And it was clunky, and at least for me. And I think it helped me be mindful of what I was eating when I finally got it all entered. But I also do think I did just fine remembering those things. And maybe if it was cake, I may not have remembered. All is right with the world. So I track and feel okay doing it, or I stop using the ones that I don't find particularly user-friendly. But what about you? Are you a tracker? Not the creeper kind, but just a tracker. And if so, how does it make you feel?
Okay, so I love to track. I use apps, I use spreadsheets, I use notes, I track all. And I think if I could be a tracker for a living, I might do it. But I think they have apps for that. And so they've taken what I'd like to do. So we were on a flight just the other day and the pilot said we would be landing in minutes. So I wrote it down in my notes function on my phone, 20 minutes, 1200 seconds. I'm watching an episode of something on my mini TV on the flight. So there's a commercial break and I look at the time, I write down how long until we touch down, the number of seconds. And so like I track and I think it gives me some control feeling and I like feeling in control. It helps anxiety. I do the same thing with my mortgage, heart rate after a run, weather, humidity the day of a run. And it's like I am my own app. Except for I use apps as well. Should I be somebody's case study?
Maybe. I also think the pilots would be thrilled to know that you were actually paying attention and making note of all the commentary from the cockpit. So one of the things we love about this series is the opportunity it gives us to hear from our previous guests and see how much they've done in the years since we last spoke. And today is definitely no different. So please join us in welcoming Dr. Shaheen Kanthawala to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are thrilled to have you in our What's New With series. Can't wait to hear all about what you've been doing these last 2 years.
Awesome. I'm very happy to be here and chat with you all again. I can't believe it's been 2 years.
Say it ain't so.
Yeah, seriously.
Okay. So we're going to start out with a couple of quick questions.
Okay.
For our new listeners and returning listeners, first question is, where are you from?
So I am originally from Mumbai in India. So born there, raised there, did my undergrad there, and then I moved to Michigan State University specifically for grad school. And so that's where I did all of my grad education.
All right. And what is it that you do now? And not like day to day from us, but like, what is your professional title?
Okay, I was like, you want to know that I love sleeping? Is that what the answer to this question is?
Well,
Okay.
absolutely, that can be a part of it.
No, but so my professional title, I am an assistant professor in the Department of Journalism and Creative Media. Wow, I messed up the name of the department. That's not a good look. Department of Journalism and Creative Media here at the University of Alabama. I was hired into a position that specifically focused on media effects related research. And so that's kind of a good but very broad way of kind of describing the kind of work that I do. I also teach like media effects related classes to the undergrads, and I'm going to be teaching a PhD class in that topic in the fall. So yeah, that's who I am professionally, I guess.
Nice.
Okay,
Yeah.
and you love to sleep. I think that's a wonderful description of who you are.
Very
So before we jump into what you've been doing and your research and scholarship and all that stuff, we always have a fun question we like to ask.
Yeah.
When young Shaheen was growing up in Mumbai, what did you want to be when you grew up? Did you see yourself like being a professor from the time you were 6 or 7 or 8, or what were you thinking? What was the young
So
Shaheen thinking?
that's a very tricky question and an interesting one because I never actually considered doing a PhD, and so professor was never on my list of things to be, but teacher always was.
Ooh.
So my grandmother was a teacher, and then I have like a few other teachers in my family, and my sister actually, she is a teacher. She teaches like high school students back home in India. And so we have a lot of like teachers in our family. And so that was always one of the things that as I like grew up, when I was really little, I was like, yeah, cool, I want to be a teacher, I want to like grade papers and stuff. But a whole different thing now, but at the time it was fascinating. Then like I said, like I grew up in India, and if you grew up in India, at some point or the other, you're going to be told you should become a doctor. And so that was one of the things that obviously was on my list for a short period of time. And when they said doctor, they mean medical doctor, not the kind of doctor that we are. So I was like, well, I guess this is, I'm still a doctor. It's just not the medical doctor that people back home ask you to kind of grow up to become. But this is something that I actually enjoy doing. I feel like if I was doing medicine, it would have been like a whole different thing. So yeah, there was some certain traits of kind of where I've landed in my professional career in like what I was hoping to do as a child, but nothing quite as like, oh, I want to be a professor.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I want to know, like, what was the factor, or was there just one that was like, all right, K-12 is out?
I don't really think that there was one factor. I think that was more of like a child dream. And as I grew up, I was like, I don't really know if I want to do this. It's not that I don't like it. It just wasn't like a primary goal anymore. Like, okay, I want to like teach. So if I was a K through 12 teacher, I think it would have been fine. It's just I like having the 40% of my time focused to research as well, which I wouldn't have had if I was doing just K through 12, for instance.
I mean, I feel like I also kind of thought about like teaching like K-12.
Yes.
Oh, then I'd have to teach people like I was, and that wasn't always
right.
a nice, kind, and I was a bratty human for a while. So, all right, we're gonna transition to that 40%. Can you just have research elevator pitch?
Yeah, sure. So I describe myself as a media and technology researcher who primarily looks at things from a health related lens. And so that would be like the one sentence version of the elevator pitch, but the longer version of the elevator pitch is essentially like I look at research where I look at technology in general where people already have access to this stuff. So it's not specialized health related tech. So it's not like we're talking about med devices or anything. So things like you already have access to, which is where our conversation, the last time I was here, we talked about health apps a lot. Most of us already have easy access to health apps, but over the last couple of years, I've been focusing a lot on different social media elements, and sort of how that speaks to how we make health, also just how these social media platforms are sort of integrated in our day-to-day lives, because the internet is essentially the largest form of like technology that we have access to, and that the information that we're getting from there is oftentimes leading to sort of behavioral and other related decisions that we make in our lives.
So my first very quick follow-up question is, remember your life exactly 2 years ago, but from 2 years to now, are you using more, the same, or fewer, or just health apps?
Health apps?
Yeah.
I think I would say similar, because I think I was just pretty much using like one at the time, and I still am using like one at the time, like right now. So I've gotten to the place where I'm like, I don't want to use health apps because they just make me feel worse about myself. And so, yeah.
No.
And because I'm like, oh, cool, I'm going to have this deadline or this goal. And then if I don't achieve it, I will feel bad. And so I think it sort of depends on each person, right? Like, so like my own disposition is that, oh, I created this goal and I failed to meet it. But like, if people are actually good at goal keeping and meeting and achieving those, that can be very, very helpful and useful. So it sort of depends from person to person.
Okay, so Shaheen, I have a follow-up on to that. So the way that you're kind of describing these health apps, it seems like you're talking about the ones that might be related to nutrition or exercise or well-being, because you are kind of checking in and getting daily feedback. So what about the health apps? Because when we last talked, we were kind of in the middle of COVID-19 and the pandemic and all sorts of other things. So what about other types of health apps where maybe I have a symptom and I don't know what to do? Like, what have you found in your research about the reliance on the different types of health apps, and maybe like the motivations for using them or not? Because you had just said, well, I don't necessarily like certain health apps because they make you feel worse. So can you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. So first of all, if you do have a medical condition that you're trying to diagnose, as far as possible, try to talk to a medical professional about it, and don't like
Good
depend.
Good disclaimer.
Don't. Yeah, that's an important disclaimer. Don't depend on the app. And there are multiple reasons for that, but the first one is that there's a very high volume of these apps available to us, and not all of them are regulated in a way that might be safe, basically. They're good as a support mechanism, and they're good as helping us like manage ourselves and manage our symptoms or manage whatever your day-to-day life is, but better to not use them as the be all and end all when it comes to diagnosis. I said I use only one, but one that I forgot to mention that I do actually have on my phone, I just don't use it much, is Headspace. And so the space for mental health related apps has grown, and like it's come to like this booming space with the pandemic especially. And so Headspace is more like it's calm, and Headspace, those are the apps that help you with meditation and stuff. And so you're not so much setting a goal and trying to achieve it or whatever, but you're using it for reasons like meditation and mental health related reasons. So that's a popular space, and using things for that is great. But then there's a whole other type of, like, if we were talking about mental health apps, there's a whole other kind of mental health app where I think it's for example would be I can't remember the one where you can better health, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Those are the ones that like get you appointments with therapists and stuff. And so I personally have never used one of those, so I can't speak to it from a personal space. But I do know that there's constantly conversations coming up on like who are the providers over here, how fit are they in order to provide this sort of assistance, and how does this work? And so those things are always evolving, and so it's important to kind of keep an ear out to see where we were kind of going with that stuff, and be aware, basically.
So I laughed so hard, not because I was judging people who go to diagnose themselves, but because I too am one of those.
It's the easiest thing, and it's the first step most of us take, especially when you have like a simple symptom, right? If it's something like straightforward, like a headache or a cold or something, you're probably just going to Google it to see if it's something that can be easily resolved. And if not, then like a doctor is a third or fourth step in your list of things to do. And that's for various reasons, partially because of just everyone has lives and they're trying to get other things like going and just function, but also medical access is not the easiest to get for everyone, you know? And so if it's something that you can potentially resolve yourself, people will choose to do that.
So I have two questions, and they're probably not related, but as I'm thinking of them now, I'm going to go ahead and say them so I don't forget.
So, I'm trying to write mine down.
Right?
So I don't forget.
So one is, you mentioned that the health apps could make you feel worse about yourself. And one thing that I have never seen when I have like downloaded the app, whatever it is, there's no like, tell me about your personality and what kind of person. So there doesn't seem to be this like AI, maybe it's coming, from apps to like make you feel like you're winning, not within a health app. So that's one. And then the other question, before I forget it, is what are media effects, and how does that relate to what you're doing?
Can you repeat the second question a little bit?
Yeah. So what are like what do you mean by media effects? And what is the effect? What is the media that you're looking at?
Yeah, sure. So the first question about the tailoring, I unfortunately do not have an answer for you, honestly, because that's a really good question, and I'm hoping that it's something that the tech industry is sort of looking into, especially with goal-based apps. You know, how to kind of make sure that you're motivating people in the right way, rather than just sort of doing a mass effect, essentially, which is like a good segue into your second question about what are media effects, right? So this is a very good question for multiple reasons. I have students in my undergrad class every semester who are often confused about the purpose of the class, because it says media effects and we have a description of the class, but they often think it's like graphic effects and stuff, and I'm like, no, we're not creating stuff, we're talking about the societal impacts of media and stuff like that, you know? So basically media effects are that, how does the media that we consume and use on a regular basis, how does it impact us as people? Whether it's how does it have like behavioral impacts? How does it affect our attitudes? How does it affect our beliefs? How does it affect our like affect and our cognition? Those are the kinds of effects that we're interested in. And media is just a very, very broad term for any sort of medium that you're consuming this content through. So historically, we looked at television, TV shows, movies, all of that fun stuff. We started with the radio, which is where this research was sort of developed in a lot of contexts and a lot of different ways. But also today we look at the impacts not only of the internet at large, but specifically social media. Social media platforms are constantly coming in and out of fashion, essentially. One is popular today, gone tomorrow, that sort of situation. And so as media effects scholars, what we're trying to do is study the underlying processes of these platforms to kind of understand how people in general are impacted by them. And the one thing that we sort of know now is that none of these things have a common effect or a common impact. So if I expose a bunch of people to a certain kind of media, everyone is not going to have the same like outcome, essentially, because of the lives that we lead and our own experiences and stuff like that. And so sort of circling back to your question about the health apps, not having that tailoring is expecting that kind of mass impact or mass effect, which doesn't always work, I guess.
Okay, so I have a couple of follow-up questions, and I'm trying to write them all down. So when we think about media effects and the way that we study media effects, what we've learned from the research that others have done and what we have done is that it really does come down to individual differences, you know, like, and for the listeners to break it down, the media obviously are going to affect us in different ways, and it's based on all sorts of different characteristics. So when we talk about health apps and the use of health apps, I think, or I feel like there are going to be some individuals, and it could be based on demographic characteristics like age, or it could be based on things like access to smartphones and smart devices where we can get health apps. I mean, so let me break it down. I'm thinking of people like my mom, you know, who's older, and putting her on a phone and saying, here's an app, and how much they struggle. What do we know, or what have we learned about these individual differences and the ones that are most relevant or pertinent when we think about the use of health apps and kind of the effect it can have on us? That was a very long question. I'm sorry.
I'm just going to sort of boil it down and try to repeat what you said. So you sort of asking like, what do we know about the differences in like different kind of impacts?
Yep.
I think that question partially answers the question, essentially, because that's what it is, right? Like we all function differently, and we have different needs, and we react to things differently. And so whether it is the way we are using particular technology, whether it's health apps or whether it's social media or whether it's whatever, you know, email, it's all different based on what we are used to and kind of how these things affect and impact us. And so we very early on, when I say very early on, I mean in my academic career, early on in my academic career, we did research on why people use health apps in general. And one of the things that we noted were intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. And so people are intrinsically motivated to do things, and that can lead them to make these decisions. But then there are extrinsic motivations as well, sort of about like things like, oh, everybody else in your peer group is doing this as well, so you might want to do that too, you know, those sort of things. With apps that are like running apps, for instance, you know, it's like, oh, everyone's forming a running group and you're like competing with each other. So it's like a gamified version of that. And the gamification aspect of health apps is often pretty successful. In gamified versions of many things are fairly successful. So that's sort of one way to look at it. And so again, like it's not the same, but you have the different focuses and the different goals for different people, basically.
That's a great answer to my very long-winded question. So thank you.
I hope it actually answered the question.
So there's I guess the creator and then the user. And one thing that I think I hear is that surely there's reasons for the design of these apps to then lead to impact, and that people aren't just like, oh, I think this sounds or looks cool. But one of the questions I have for you is, for you personally, what's your like favorite part of this to study? Is it the behavior, the motivation, like you just mentioned, and then how do you do that studying?
Mm-hmm. For me, what I like doing is what I like understanding is more than behavior is like the processes of how people get to those decisions and understanding. So I look at a lot of like user preferences. And so like, why are you choosing this? What is the reasoning behind this? And if something is presented to you, how are you making your determinations about whether or not to use it? This is, I know we're talking about this in the context of health and health apps over here, but a lot of my research has nothing to do with health in some situations, where especially where we're looking at the way content is reaches audiences on platforms where the algorithm is doing most of the heavy lifting, right? Like TikTok. TikTok is telling you what you need to watch, and so you're watching that because that app is telling you what to consume, essentially. And so, how do people make sense of that sort of information, and how does that affect them in their consumption and processing of information on those platforms? So that's what I am like primarily interested in, oftentimes.
So many more follow-up questions now.
Sorry.
You said the word TikTok.
I did say the word TikTok, yes.
Okay, so I know, and this can be answered just based on kind of observational experiences or based on what you've studied. So I'm really curious about the role of TikTok specifically, because as you had noted, well, okay, let me back it up. We had talked when we were talking over 2 years ago, we were kind of in a period of time where there was a lot of health information on various apps, on online, the internet, places like that. There was also a lot of misinformation at that time. And so what I'm wondering is, with kind of the way TikTok works and the algorithms and all of that, it seems like people who may be seeking out health information, there's like not a quality control filter for TikTok. So I feel like there's just so much that could be studied about TikTok and health apps and what we know and believe to be true, what actually isn't true. Can you tell us your thoughts about that? I mean, are we going down like a bad rabbit hole with TikTok, or?
So that's a complicated question, right? About whether it's a bad rabbit hole or not, just because of that. Like TikTok often gets painted as the dangerous app currently, but that's all of the internet, right? It's just that suddenly we are being presented information in a way that we were not used to or wasn't popular earlier, and now it is, especially with populations that are younger today but are going to be the adults of tomorrow, essentially, right? So fun fact that I'm sure many of our listeners might have heard or read about, but did you know that TikTok was oftentimes the preferred option over Google for younger people? They go to TikTok instead of Google. If they want to look something up, they'll often go to TikTok instead of going to Google.
It's true.
Yeah. So that's pretty big, right? Because Google, you Google a question and they give you whatever the information is. But TikTok, they like that it's giving you information that's more sort of tailored to what they are interested in or what their contexts are. And so that as a search engine platform, honestly, is growing, which is a very interesting phenomenon. And so whether or not the way TikTok works in general is like most platforms, their algorithm is, again, a black box. We don't really know how it works, but TikTok is one of the very good very, very good at sort of making their algorithm tell us exactly what we would be interested in viewing at a particular time. So they're probably like picking up a lot of cues from the way we use our devices and stuff, you know? And so we get a lot of tailored information, and it comes to us through this algorithm that's essentially like, well, you're going to watch this one video at a specific time, and then you're going to scroll past it, and we are going to tell you what it is that you like versus don't like. And mostly people enjoy that because they're like, oh, hey, I like this, and it's giving me exactly what I like. And so the effect or the impact, that the way I see it, and it's actually one of the arguments that we're making in our forthcoming papers, is that what TikTok is doing is it has this sort of normalization effect. So if you keep seeing, let's say, topic X, right? You keep seeing content about topic X on your For You page, and this is the platform that you are primarily focused on or getting your content from, you feel that everyone in your circle or in your peer group essentially believes this, and everyone sort of understands this, and this is the norm, this is the new norm, whatever. And so that normalization impact can have a sort of persuasive effect. And so whether it's good or whether it's bad information is not based on using TikTok as much as the content that you are engaging with that's being pushed to you because of that. So I wouldn't say that the platform is good or bad. It's that, okay, it's that the kind of content that's being shared, and that you are essentially, the algorithm is recognizing that you are interested in this kind of content. And so there have been conversations in the last 2 years that TikTok has made it so that mental health related diagnoses in younger populations are skyrocketing, and that honestly, it might not be a bad thing depending on the situation, because what it's doing is sort of helping people recognize that, okay, it's okay to talk about this, you know, it's okay to recognize that you might need support, there are other people like you, and so that potentially could be looked on as a good thing. But at the same time, if you have conspiracy theories and everybody's just being exposed to that conspiratorial thinking over and over again, you're like, well, everyone believes this, so if you say that's not true, then you're the one who's wrong. And that's going to sort of make that phenomenon dangerous in that situation. My colleagues and I, we call this phenomenon algorithmic conspirituality. And so yeah, so it's basically like a portmanteau of conspiracy and spirituality, and basically the algorithm is kind of playing this role in this phenomenon.
So beyond health, if you have to list the other areas where we are affected, what would some of those be?
Just as people exposed to media?
Yeah.
I think it's just
like a top.
Yeah, I think like health is just one of the domains, right? I think instead of like top 3, even I'll just like list the umbrella thing for you is just our information processing. Like that's like how we understand and how we cultivate our perception of reality. Media has an effect in that. It's not the sole effect, but it definitely plays an effect, and it has an impact in that.
Okay, I feel like we're going to have to probably schedule 2 more episodes with you. There's so much to talk about. But we're at the other part of the podcast where we're rapid fire part 2. And we would love to get some recommendations from you for all of our listeners. So these are just meant to be fun and recs. So what TV show are you watching right now, or what is your favorite?
There are so many, and honestly, the minute you ask me that, I can't remember a single one. So this is a very hard question, but I will tell you, I recently watched a TV show on Hulu called Extraordinary, I think. And it's like a comedy show about a world where everyone has superpowers, and you get superpowers when you're 18 years old, and the lead character is like 24 and she doesn't have superpowers. And so it's like a comedy about her just kind of being someone in her early 20s, mid 20s, trying to navigate that while also navigating the fact that she is one of the few people who don't have like superpowers.
Okay, that's a good. And I also know just from other conversations that you like Abbott Elementary.
Oh my God, I love Abbott Elementary. Thank you for bringing that up. Such a good TV show. Excellent. Everyone should watch it if they haven't already.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not going to ask you what superpower you would want, but I want you to think about that. And
I know the answer to this question.
Tell.
Teleportation.
Oh.
Yeah, immediately. I don't want to travel anymore. I just want to get from point A to point B immediately.
Okay, so what book are you reading, or should we be reading if we haven't read it yet?
I have recently been reading these mystery novels, but there's this author called Lucy Foley. I think that's how you say her name, if I'm not mistaken. And they're like either murder mysteries or like almost murder mysteries, basically something or the other creepy happening at a particular location. So like one of the ones that I read was called The Guest List, and it's like someone's wedding at this remote island and all the guests are there, and then you don't know until you know there's been a murder, but you don't know who committed the murder, and you don't know who is murdered even until like the end. So yeah, so I've been like reading I think like 2 or 3 of her books recently.
So do you have a favorite movie or a movie that we absolutely need to see?
Movie, that's a hard one. Let me see. I recently watched Everything Everywhere All at Once. Yeah, and that was really great. So I would recommend that. That movie has been nominated for 11 Oscars. So if you haven't watched it, watch it.
Okay, final question is, if your life was a reality show, or if you would want to be on a reality show, which one would that be?
I think I've mentioned this in like casual conversation, but I think academia would be a great setting for a reality TV show. So I don't know about an existing TV show, but I think we at Race Cipher could make for a great reality TV.
Shaheen, it has been so much fun catching up with you. I feel like we need to do this every month or so. But
absolutely,
it's been wonderful hearing about the research that you've been doing and kind of seeing how it's all progressed over the last 2 years. So thank you for spending some time with us.
Yeah, it's always great to chat with y'all. So thank you for having me back, and it's been great catching up with you both.
All right,
thank you.